Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Mustard Education. My name is Paul, and I'm stood next to my Volvo as usual, explaining my week. It has, of course, been a week full of revelation, full of joy, and full of frustration. This week, the frustration levels got a little bit too high, to the extent where I actually just wish I didn't have to do it at all. It's that infuriating. I was never under any illusion that this would be an easy task. I knew right from the beginning I would be pulling my hair out. Most of it's still here, but the problems are accumulating. For a start, I'm not getting the opportunity to come to work to this yard, but I still have to pay for it. So far, I haven't introduced my children or their names because they kind of want to remain a little bit anonymous, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to start referring to them as Child A and Child B. And the reason for this now is that Child B does have some behavioural issues, which we've known about for years. Child A, on the other hand, is suffering from some behavioural issues, but they're much more like the kind of thing you would expect of somebody this age. As they are twins, they know each other inside out, and they find each other the most amusing person in the world. Not that they admit it. And this is starting to cause some problems. I'll come back to that in a bit. In the meantime, let's talk about all of the positives of the week. The two main ways I consider of learning are with either the carrot or the stick. Now, of course, the stick is definitely not encouraged these days, and that's another point I'm going to talk about when I get to it. But the carrot, it's easier to learn things when you're really interested in it. And if you're fascinated by something, you may as well pursue it and see where else you go. So, on Tuesday evening, we had a trip out. Not wasting the school day, so to speak, but setting off out at 7 o'clock. Set off out to Manchester, all three of us, on the train, with a view of taking some liminal photography, because Manchester can be quite an interesting place in the evening. But not only that, to go and explore places like Chinaland, the Gay Village, and all these other bits of really quirky and interesting places. It was a good trip. It was a very good trip. We enjoyed the train journey. We enjoyed the train station. We enjoyed just our perambulation around the city. The trams and their funny little honking sounds, carrying people from one place to another. The food delivery cyclists, most without helmets or lights or any real interest in any kind of road safety. They were fascinated, of course, by the bright city lights, the noise, the commotion, and all of the eateries, and of course the rather unfortunate vagrants. They wanted to have some food there, but we don't know the food. And that's something I'll come back to in a bit. Naturally, the idea of this would be an experience, something they can remember, something they can talk about, and something also to write about the following day. And in the spirit of the rather wonderful evening that we had, I also joined in. And so the idea was to try and write a page full of the experience from the night before. And we each marked each other's bit of work. I'd like to show you what they wrote, but they don't really want you to see it. As my girls have an ever-increasing interest in all things Far East, we took geography onto China, because they don't seem to be that interested in European countries. Why not? There's a lot to talk about with China, from the Great Wall of China to all of the dynasties and the size of the place, down to, in fact, the Eastern way, the culture, the way they respect their elders, the way, just their ways basically. And it got me thinking, where does it stop? Because China's there, and then you have Japan, and you have North Korea, then you have other countries like Vietnam, then you have the islands, then you have more islands. And there's not really any great gaps between the islands, which all seem very, very far eastern, and then suddenly you're at Australia. Where does it stop? Where does the culture stop? I'm always happy to be completely honest about the things I don't know. And that's what makes this kind of exciting for me because it's a whole lovely big learning curve as well. But the sticking point, although there's been plenty of progress made, has still been maths. I'm enjoying it. Child A is enjoying it, but child B is enjoying it a bit less. And we had quite an episode of arsing about, let's say, within this particular session, where I just thought that I can't really teach this particular thing. And of course we have this balance between one and the other, where when one child starts to mess around, the other spots it and starts to behave. So we'll have this movement between one and the other. It's like what I've got to do is just teach them one at a time, and that would be much more time consuming, but probably get much better results. But I'm already struggling with time. I'm not struggling with motivation, but I am seriously struggling with time. What do they do in school when you have someone who starts to mess around? Oh yeah, they get ignored. They get sent to the back of the class, so to speak. I always remember teachers having phrases like, look, you know, I've got a job, I've got this, I don't need to study this any longer, you do. It doesn't really matter to me whether you learn this or not, etc. But I can't really apply that to my own children, because if I was applying that, they'd have just gone to the school that we didn't want them to go to. So again, I've got to think just a bit beyond this. I have been getting quite a lot of suggestions from people in comments, which I'm sorry I've not really had the chance to answer, and people I know, etc., people I don't know, all saying, why don't you sort of plug them into this sort of national curriculum kind of thingy, so you don't have to think about what it is that you're doing, etc. All the work's there, all the working out's been done for you. You just have to basically monitor it. Well, that would suggest that all children learn in the same way, and they don't. And it's fine, because I'm already thinking around this. You see, what I'm trying to do at the moment is discover all of the gaps that they currently have, where I presume that they wouldn't have a gap as you move on to the next subject, the next level. Everything before that's got to be understood in order to make it easy to understand the next bit. So I wrote on the blackboard about the whole metric system. I would like to say that they passed on this particular task, but not with 100%, which means there were still a few bits they were not entirely sure about. What seems to work the best though is going things in a rather loose manner, where there's no being told what to do as such, but just involving them in a conversation about a particular topic, getting their brains to go places they've never been to before. We end up in this conversation about what if we emptied the fish tank out and filled it up with orange juice, fresh orange juice from Lidl. And not only did we calculate how much that would cost, but also whether it would be any good for the fish. Could they see where they were going, and would it stink after a few days? And the answer is yes, it would. But not as bad as it would do if you filled it up with milk. Although that would be cheaper. Am I muddy?
Yeah,
Right.
it's really muddy.
Thank you. Come on. The highlight of the week, though, seems to be about food, and again into the interesting cooking Korean dishes. I set them a task to find something that we could cook, something that we'd all enjoy, and they did. And they came up with bibimbap. That's it. Bibimbap is a very, very popular South Korean dish. Many Brits seem to have experimented with it. I'd not heard of it until this particular day. Naturally needed some ingredients, which was rice, had that already. Meat, had that already. And then this chili paste called gochujang, which rather unusually, you had to be over 18 to buy. Turns out it's because it's got fermented stuff in there, but I mean, a little bit of fermented something. Does that mean you need to be over 18 to buy a banana now? No. Anyway, we made this as best as possible, being as authentic as we could, by marinating the meat in this particular mix of the chili paste, soy sauce, sesame seed oil, and honey, rice, bean sprouts, chopped ginger, garlic, carrots and cabbage fried, and bunged it all together. Oh, and spinach as well, and served it all up for dinner. And you know what? It was fantastic. I really enjoyed every single bit of it. But unfortunately, I was the only one. The girls kind of liked it, but they was a bit picky with it, which is a bit strange. But they've got to get used to it, you see, because they want to go to South Korea to live. That is, they're absolutely dead set on this. That's where they're going to live when they grow up. So they've got to immerse themselves into this, and they want to do. They want to go to these restaurants, but you've got to know what to order. You've got to have some idea of what kind of food you've got there to eat. And not only that, I suppose in Chinese and Japanese and South Korean restaurants, they give you a spoon or a fork. Also very interesting, because they were desperate to buy some chopsticks. The next day, we was all over Rochdale looking to find somewhere that sold chopsticks. And we did find somewhere, eventually at Dunhelm. And they've been using them on everything else they've been eating ever since, no matter what it is. So regardless of the fact that their first bit of experience with South Korean food, this and also kimchi, they haven't enjoyed quite as much as they was hoping for. It hasn't put them off, and it hasn't stopped them, and they want to carry on. And this week, they want to do some more. So maybe just like as it was when I was a teenager, things like beer, things like cigarettes, you didn't like them, they were an acquired taste. They're going to develop a taste for something that is much more wholesome. And I'm happy to go along with this. And I'm happy to skimp myself further to see them be happy, learning about a different culture and eating properly. The rest of the week wasn't quite as adventurous with food, but they still enjoyed it. And they still wanted to write what we're having for dinner on the blackboard and use their chopsticks. So I'm happy with that. Getting back to how I used to teach them before they went to school, where I would just read them all sorts of things and they'd be really interested and request that we talk more about it later. More science tonight, they would say. And that's what would happen. I went back to the whole size of space thing to try and help them get their head around the enormity of the observable universe. And I used the blackboard for that. Going back to the distance of our planet to the sun, which is 93 million miles, one astronomical unit, taking 8 minutes for light to travel from there to here, to further explain the size of the Milky Way, which is 100,000 light years from one side to the other. I'd explained loads last week about how satellites work and how things can't really escape. Estimated at least 100 billion stars in the galaxy of the Milky Way. That's at least, it could be up to 400 billion. And that our galaxy is just one of 2 trillion other galaxies in the observable universe. And then tried to write down the number of potential stars that we have in our universe. Now this kind of went down quite well, but there was a little bit of wandering off as well. That's fine. I gave him a break and then we came back to do maths again. Doing shapes, figuring out the area of shapes, the perimeters of shapes by just having a couple of numbers here and there. It was all going so well until the messing about started. And then unfortunately, then things can't go well. Then nobody can learn. No progress can be made. And it got me thinking, and I did explain to them about this, that kind of behaviour would see you getting the cane or the slipper, whatever the case, it would result in pain. And you'd fear the teacher. And then you'd fear your parents when you went home because they'd be told about it. There were none of this, don't you dare hit my child, don't you dare that to my child. Actually, there was a little bit, it was starting to creep in at that point. And I'm not suggesting that those are a time that we went back to, but discipline entirely with carrots isn't really working. And you've got to carry on thinking of more ways around these particular things. Now, I'm great with that, but I do not understand how that could possibly happen with a class of 20 or 30 people. There's no way any teacher can negotiate around all of the messing around that you would get in a class without any kind of punishment and still give everybody a fair chance. Anyway, that's me finished for the week, finished rambling. Hopefully next week I'll have more good news. You never know, they might even get into school, but I doubt it.